Hello and welcome to another episode of MotorInc First. Today it's my turn to ask the questions, externalize some thoughts, exterminate some doubts. What car are we talking about again?
You haven't guessed it yet. But this time I've also got some words ready. I'm glad that Shumi hasn't gotten to them yet. Hyundai Exter.
Right.
Any questions?
Yeah, so I wanted to ask you this. You remember there is this famous British clip of a cook, he's making something, and then this lady says if he added ham to it, it would be like a British carbonara, and he turns around and says, if my grandmother had wheels, she'd be a bike. And then everybody dissolves into laughter.
Yeah.
So tell me, at what point does a hatchback become an SUV?
Yeah. I mean, anytime you choose to give it that name, it becomes an SUV. And if you choose to buy one, then it becomes an SUV. Until then, you'll keep pointing fingers at it and saying that, oh, that's not an SUV, until you buy one. And then you'll be like, yeah, I appreciate the ground clearance and I appreciate that it's a bit more rugged. It's two sides to the same coin, and it's just a question of whether you have it or not.
So is the Exter an SUV or is it a tall hatchback?
Let's be very clear that I think that name itself, Exter, what it should have been called is the Inter.
Okay, why?
It's not meant for external going outside the city. It's meant for internal use. I think that is one thing I would like to clear up right up front. This is a city car. So anybody who's thinking about it as, oh wow, it's got more ground clearance and I'm going to go travel with it, and I'm sure you can do it with just about everything, but that it's going to be apt or better for it because it's called the Exter and is looking the way it does. No, it's not going to happen.
All right.
I've got reasons for it. We'll get into that later. But yeah, broad lines.
Interesting. So i20 Active, Exter, same zone.
i20 Active, I would say, is going to be a bit more. I mean, when it was around,
Yeah.
right? I think was better as an all-rounder, right? I think the Exter is a very cleverly packaged car.
Okay.
It's a car with a lot of purpose, not very much soul. Right? It's a very practical, very handy car. It's a great first car. That's what I've come away with thinking about it. You can end up looking at it from the outside and thinking it'll be fantastically versatile and it'll be this and that. It could have been, but what they have ended up with is a car that will, for most people who are buying their first car, will be a great pick.
Let's start at that. I think that's a great place to start. What do you think are the qualities that define what a first car should be? And I'd like you to explain it from the perspective of how the Exter does those things and confirms the idea, saying, yes, first car, this is the kind of thing you would like to see.
Think about it this way. We've tested the Alto here earlier, right? Quid as well. We have not tested it, but they are now cars that you're looking, when you look at buying one of these, you are spending close to 5-6 lakhs, close to 7 lakhs if you're buying the top end variants.
Right.
The Exter starts at 6 lakhs.
Right.
So in terms of price, that's one of the things that they've nailed, right? Because they've really managed to come up with a great price tag for a car that's packing a lot by way of must-haves that people will be looking for today. Like, for instance, 6 airbags is standard today. And a lot of people, for them, that is a proxy for safety, right? So it's giving a lot as standard and adding a lot of value through that. The bigger thing is, I think when people are spending that much money and you come into this 6-7 lakh rupee space, you realize that the Exter is big.
Okay.
So, the size of it, you're automatically stretching every rupee that you're investing in it, right? Because it will not be a car that will feel small or inadequate. And that's the other side of it. It doesn't feel like a budget car, right? From the outside, definitely not. It might be a design like we saw even with the Verna that people might look at it and think like, what's going on here?
Right.
But you don't think of it as budget at any point, right? Even though it is a smaller car. I mean, it's what is also called as a micro SUV now. But it doesn't feel like that it's a low-cost car.
Okay.
So I think they've managed to get these few key ingredients right, which will make it very attractive for people.
So if I understand you correctly, you're saying the exterior design, whatever it is, doesn't give you the sense of this is a cheap car. It gives you the sense of, okay, you've paid some amount of money for what looks like a reasonably good-looking premium-ish car.
Yes.
How many H's are there on the outside in terms of the lights?
Hey, don't make me count all this. Yeah, I think 4. 2 at the front, 2 at the back. At least that's what I noticed. There may be a few more hidden ones over there. No, there 4 in the lights. Yeah.
So the exterior, you're saying, I've read criticisms about it being too busy, and I think that Exter written in big letters across. But you're saying it looks good. It looks attractive.
I think now you get a sense of what Hyundai is trying to do. they're building a family look.
Yeah.
Right? There are certain themes that you can see. If you see the front wheel arches, the rear wheel arches, and how those lines flow, you can connect them to the Verna. Right? They have that very angular lines, but they are popped out, not in the typical, flared wheel arches kind of way. It's a different style.
Right.
Like we said for the Verna, that looks ornamental, right? They've got a similar kind of treatment. If you see the piano black finishes at the front and the rear, it's nothing that we would have seen on an automobile earlier, something like that. So they're trying something different. Whether it works or not it's over time that we will know, because as we've seen that sometimes people come and do something new, radical.
Sure.
Like I think the easiest example would be the Audi grill back then, the Bavarian beard, which everybody went like, man, that's massive.
Right.
It's ridiculous. But then everybody followed.
Yeah, but a massive beard is still acceptable. A massive kidney, on the other hand.
The kidney.
Okay, let's come back to the Exter for a minute. If you're creating a family look, why didn't they write VERNA in big letters under the giant Hyundai logo on the bonnet of the...
I think they just had the opportunity to do it here and they didn't have it on the Verna. Maybe it would have been there.
Because I'm coming at it from a point of, we've seen these old Cretas running around which have the big CRETA written on them, like Ford would do Ford and Land Rover does Land Rover. And I can still understand Land Rover saying Land Rover, but a Creta saying Creta, or a Nios saying Neon i20 or i10 or Nios or whatever on the lower air dam, I'm like, that's not very nice. Especially because some of these LEDs are brighter than the headlights. Sometimes it feels like in the daylight. Okay, fair enough. Let's get past this. Clearly, I have hang-ups with the way this thing is moving forward. Interiors. What's the interior like? How many people will sit? What's the family situation there?
So I think one thing we have to mention is that this is, I'm sure most of you already know, that this is built on the Grand i10 Nios platform, right? So the floor pan, or what would be essentially your cabin space, is the same. Right? So how much space you're getting in the front versus the rear, knee room and all that is pretty much the same.
Okay.
Right?
And if I remember right, the i10 Nios was not a very unspacious car. It was a pretty reasonably spaced car.
Hyundai's been very clever. In fact, this is a trick I learned from them. How they would maximize comfort even though space wasn't all that much, especially in the back seat.
Right.
Something that you guys can keep in mind, like at the rear seats of several Hyundais, you'll notice that the seat base angle is like this. Right? So what that effectively does is gives you more support for your legs, for your thighs. So you don't have the need to stretch out. So even though there might not be that much leg room, you are still comfortable. Right? So that's something that they did with the Santro, with the Grand i10. And it's the same over here as well.
Right.
So it is a fairly spacious car. But what they have really managed to, add to the experience is it's tall. I've got a picture. I think we should be able to show it to you with me sitting in the back, and the amount of headroom on offer is ridiculous.
Okay.
It's a lot, right?
How have they managed that?
So they have basically gone with a more upright stance for the cabin.
Right.
So while the floor pan is the same, the upper structure is bigger. It's different, right? So it's got a more vertical A-pillar. So all of it gives it that SUV theme, right? And that's what ends up giving you a greater sense of roominess on the inside. So even though your actual space available would be the same, in terms of feel, it'll be a vehicle that will give you the extra vibe of saying, hey, let's go somewhere.
So if they had a lighter colored interior, your sense of space would increase even further.
Of course, it would.
So why didn't they do that?
So here's the interesting thing. I can't say it with more details, but Hyundai wanted to come into this segment earlier than they have.
Okay.
So this was a project that they have really pushed hard to get it out to the market, because they realized they may have missed the bus with the Punch already coming in and getting whatever volumes it is, which are huge, right? So which is why I think the price was critical for them to really break into the segment and make a mark, basically just win it, right? So that has been their focus, I think, with the price. They have taken the Grand i10 platform, used it to create the Exter, changed it to give it that SUV style. So some of the things are still work in progress. So in the sense, I would have liked to see a dash which was speaking the new Hyundai language as well, right? Which this isn't. This is the i10 Nios, right? In that it's the same dash. It looks like a traditional Hyundai dash. If you look at the Verna, that's a new language,
Right.
which works with the new language on the outside.
Right.
You don't get that here, right? So you'll have to wait 3 years to the facelift.
If I'm attuned to Hyundai's design language, then I can understand the dissonance between the exterior having moved on to a new language and the interior still sitting at Grand Nios. But will a buyer who's buying their first car notice any difference?
Exactly. So for the first time buyer, this is not a problem at all.
Okay.
Because what you'll be looking at is functionality. And like we said, the space is superb. There's no two ways about that. It's not wide. So, as a 5-seater, it's going to be a bit tight.
Okay.
But for 4, it's very practical.
Right.
The thing is, what Hyundai does very well every time is give you a sense of quality, right? The sense that this is more premium than the price would suggest.
Right.
So the fit, finish, the materials in use, all of that is great. You don't feel like you're skimping, right?
Okay. Question, and this is not just an extra question, it's a general question. We never see the base versions of these cars because manufacturers are very, very reluctant to give them to us for testing. We've seen the top version of the Alto, which is about 7, and then the top version of the Exter is what we are seeing, which is about 10. Will the bottom version of the Exter rival what the Alto looks like, or will that be a step up also?
Even if you go to the lower variants, what you will end up missing out are on features.
Not the finish and the materials and
It's
all of
not
that.
going to be different, right?
All right.
The materials that are there, if I look at the materials themselves, do I feel they are the best quality materials that Hyundai has offered till now? No, they're not. You can see that they've pared back a bit on that front.
Right.
It is not going to be, I think, as plush as the more expensive Venue or as well finished as the Venue, right? Which is more expensive.
Right.
But is it something that's going to feel amiss or is going to disappoint you? No, absolutely not.
Got it. Okay. So we've talked about interior, we've talked about exterior, we've got a sense of the value for money quotient. Let's talk about the driving. So as usual, Hyundai has 32 engines and 89 transmissions.
No, I wish it had. This time, no. There's just the one engine, which is the 1.2 liter naturally aspirated engine with the manual transmission and the AMT. And the cool thing this time around is that for the first time ever, you've got an AMT with paddle shifters, which sounds a little suspect. And
Right.
you'd think that you're really pushing it with that idea. But it's not. I was really surprised. I've got a clip of that while using it. Hopefully we can show you that as well. It's really quick.
Yeah.
Downshifts are really quick. If the revs can allow it, it will do it.
So will this be the best AMT on the market in the class?
So in a way, if you're using the manual mode, yeah, it will definitely be very, very easily the most enjoyable. If you're using the normal auto mode, Hyundai has taken a certain logic to it, which is to say that let this be a smooth experience. We don't want it to be the quickest experience in that.
Fair
so
enough.
minimize head nod, make it a smooth, easygoing affair.
What is this head nod? I keep seeing this car guys inventing new terms all the...
Head nod is this, no. So it's basically
So you shouldn't say yes when you're changing a gear. Is that what head nod is?
Yeah, you'll end up saying yes. That's basically it. You're saying yes when it's doing gear changes.
Okay.
There's the torque interrupt between gear shifts, and because it's a single clutch and it's a genuine manual transmission, it has to kind of drop the revs, the performance, so they can make the shift. So that's about it.
And this you're saying they've aimed for smoothness, so head nod is a lot less.
Yeah. So they basically said, so that's what this car is, right? It's saying, I want to be a great solution for mobility. I don't want to be the most involving experience to drive. I don't want it to be the most memorable vehicle you'll ever see or own. But it's a fantastic starting point. I think that is what they've tried to create. And in every front, they have tried to deliver that. And before we move on further on the driving front, one thing we didn't speak about on the interiors is the boot space, right? So there's a very clever little thing that you all should keep in mind, that when we are talking about boot space, there are two figures that come into use, right?
Okay.
So, and Hyundai has pulled a trick Borrowed a trick even so from the Tata Punch, which is one of its which is
Rivals.
its biggest rival.
Right.
Right. So the Tata Punch quotes a boot space of 366 liters or something like that, and there's a second figure which is 321 liters.
Okay.
So there are two methods of boot space measurement: VDA 962 and 95 something or whatever, something like that.
But once again, I'd like to thank the authorities for creating more confusion.
So the thing is, the 36 whatever figure of the Punch is the number that everybody remembers and everybody quotes, which is a massive number for a micro SUV, right? So the Exter has come out and quoted a figure of 391. So everybody's like, 391 is ridiculous, right? That's massive.
Yeah.
That's sedan space almost, right? So the Creta is 400 something, yeah? So this is big. And it catches everybody's attention. But the point is that this is a bit of a trick. So this measurement is not up to the parcel tray, it's up to the roof.
Oh, thank you.
Right? So their numbers are 320 whatever, and I asked Hyundai for their normal figure, which they could not provide, but I think it's safe to say that it is a big boot, but 390 is when you remove the parcel tray and really load it all the way to the top.
Is the rearview mirror optional?
No, it's not. And for a good reason, because they've created a really nice rear windscreen. It's really large, so you get a great view out as well. So they've
No, not if you load it up all the way to the roof with suitcases, right?
Exactly, which is why you shouldn't, because you've got a great view out. So they've done all the practical bits as well. So aside from the boot space, nice windscreen. So spending time in this cabin is good. And on the road, we were going back to the driving experience. So we spoke about the AMT. I did the geeky bits of checking gearing and all of that. And it's very clear with that their focus was making sure that this engine can deliver good fuel efficiency for everyday use.
Okay.
Right? So for city primarily, it'll be fine.
What will you get, you think?
They are claiming about 19. I think if you do with normal driving, 14, that types should be okay.
Which is what the segment is at?
There are others who'll do more. Like I think the Suzuki 1.2 is the benchmark for me.
This is the Fronx engine.
The Fronx also has that. The Ignis has it. The Swift has it. All of them in different, it's mild hybrid, like they've had different iterations of it. But that 1.2 4-cylinder has been a benchmark for me. Right? In terms of smoothness, refinement, low speed, high speed, and fuel efficiency. This engine in the Exter is pulling a punch on the punch because it has refinement. It's incredibly quiet. It's incredibly smooth. And I think that is one thing that you can again connect to the Verna, that this feels like a really quiet cabin.
Okay.
It really cocoons you. So again, it doesn't feel budget because of that, right? So even if you're traveling on the highway, you're at 90 kilometers an hour. And this is the bit about the gearing, right? Because they've shortened the fifth gear. Okay. Because if they hadn't, the engine doesn't have enough punch again.
To take overtakes.
Yeah, you would have to shift a lot. So fifth gear is a little shorter than the other. I mean, in terms of the steps, the gap is narrow, so that it can keep moving when required. Would this car do well with 5 on board and luggage? As long as you're just looking to cover kilometers, okay. But if you throw in inclines or if you throw in, like rough stuff, you're going to have to work the engine. You will, if you want to move faster, you will have to work the engine because it's quite a dull engine, right? It's been that's the character it's had. At low revs, it will struggle a bit, so if you are starting off on an incline, you will have to rev it up a bit and get it going. So in many ways, I think going for the AMT makes a lot of sense because it'll cut out all this hassle. And if you want to go faster, you just use the paddles.
Right.
So that'll be convenient for a lot of people.
Okay, ride quality?
Again, very well balanced. I think it's comfortable. It's not soft. But Hyundai, again, at the rear, with a full load, I think it will get a bit bouncy. I think. As of now, I'm going to say I think. But for normal kind of use case, again, which is why I'm saying city use, with 2 people, even if you're 4, it's fine. You're not going to be at those higher speeds.
Right.
And talking about rough roads, that the Extra factor, it's good.
Okay.
I did take it over some bad roads, potholes, and it does feel comfortable. It doesn't feel harsh. It's actually a very easy car to drive, to steer, to everything, But
Okay, so it's adding up to an extremely competent sounding car, but it's not adding up to be a fun car to drive.
Like I said, it's a car with purpose, not much soul. So it's very competent. Nothing that you'll really complain about. But is it a car that you'll get in and say, hey, I want to drive more? Right? Or I really enjoyed this. Oh, what a lovely car. No, it's a great solution.
But wasn't the Grand i20, i10 Nios a more fun car to drive?
I think the Grand i10 Nios, so this is an interesting thing. Grand i10 Nios is a similar natured car. The Grand i10 Nios' trump card when it came out was it had the turbo petrol.
Which this doesn't get.
So they discontinued the turbo petrol even on the Nios, right? And they didn't introduce it here. I think if they brought it to the Exter, there would have been it would have been a bit too close to the venue. That is my take on it.
Okay.
Because in terms of space for a lot of people, city dwellers, this would be just fine, right?
Okay.
It might miss a bit of the polish of
So
the
wait,
venue.
are you actually saying that they thought it would be a threat to the venue, so the turbo petrol engine isn't in the Exter?
I don't know if they thought it or not, but I would think that they would have been worried about it. Because, I mean, look at the sense of space that you get, right? You're sitting higher up than the Nios. So a lot of what people want, quite simply. And I think the Exter is showing us a trend, right? We will want smaller vehicles which are better loaded, better equipped, because we know what our use case is now, right? We are living in the urban environment. We want something that's handy for that space, but we do not want to compromise on the convenience and features just because it's smaller.
Yeah, we want it useful, but we don't really want it basic.
Exactly. So I think for a lot of people, if it had the turbo petrol, it would have been a great package. It would have been a great all-rounder. So, and it would have been a bit too close to the venue as far as I'm
When is
concerned.
BS7 coming?
There's some time still.
Because I don't think, if I'm reading this market correctly, then I don't think these non-turbo engines are going to survive BS7, right?
Yeah, we're going to be going.
So we are okay. The Exter with turbo petrol eventually has to come.
So I think Exter with a new dashboard will come with the facelift. So 3 years away, not too long, huh? Yeah. With the turbo petrol. So yeah, we'll have a few years for that as well. So
okay, a few things that I have viewer questions that, so I have viewer questions that I'd get into next. But before I do, I was reading up about the Exter because I know that I'd have to sit with you and pretend to be intelligent about cars. Right, so somebody said that the 10 extension in the wheelbase over the Grand i10 over the Nios makes this a incredibly spacious car.
it's the same wheelbase. I don't know what they're talking about.
Also, there is no 1 centimeter added research because my question was 1 centimeter really?
No, it's I specifically clarified this because see the body width is said to be more. So I checked with their R&D team. The track widths are the same. So the track width is basically the distance between your left wheel and your right wheel. Front and rear, the widths can be different. It's the same as the Nios. There's no difference there.
Okay.
The wheelbase is the same, which is why I said the floor pan is effectively the same. It's the top hat, as it's called, the body on top. That's different.
There was some chatter about a bump in the roof at the rear, which also adds to the headroom.
So they have scooped out the interior. So a lot of people will be looking at this and comparing it to the Punch, and in terms of dimensions like height specifically, because it's an SUV. The thing is that a lot of the height of the Exter is because of its roof rails.
Right, yeah, because they do look quite tall, yeah.
Yeah, they are quite tall. So it's, I don't have the exact figures. I don't remember them offhand, but I do have them in my notes.
Thankfully, they're still in centimeters and not meters.
And depending on what wheel size you've got, so it's got 15-inch rims and 14-inch rims. So the overall height drops a bit. And of course, the roof rails are adding about 1.5 centimeters or something like that. So that's the height being added there. But in other dimensions, it's pretty close to the Punch.
Okay, one more last point before I get into the questions. So Hyundai seems to get a lot of credit for scooping out the front seats so that the rear passengers get more. How is this so rocket sciencey that nobody else has cottoned onto this, or is this just something that people say in there?
I think it's just, you see it for the first time and get stuck in your head. It may have been done by somebody else as well. I don't know if Hyundai was the first person to do it.
Right.
I would actually think that would have been Honda maybe, because Honda's always been the one trying to find every little bit of space that they could add in. In my head, it would have been a Honda. But yeah, I don't think it as a USP of Hyundai.
Fair enough. Final question. Why do the driver and the passenger not need to rest their arms in the Exter?
Good question. I'm actually all for it. It's okay. Be more attentive. You can't be sitting like this and driving.
But how will you look stylish if you don't do that? The music system has got bass and thump, right? So, but bass and thump and not being able to sit like that, it doesn't make any sense to me. Yeah.
I'm very happy when there are no armrests and all. It's like means you have to sit properly upright and focus on the road and not just be like sitting like this with one hand on your phone or fiddling with something. It's okay. Steering wheel hai.
I think your car guys are just spoiled.
Yeah, I agree. I don't get it. This obsession with armrests, I do not get. I just do not get it.
If you get armrests, your arms will be small and weak. Okay, so now we'll get to the user questions. Prayag Lives Eureka says, I felt rear suspension can be a challenge for its so-called off-roading capabilities as it is termed.
I think forget about the off-roading capabilities. It can rough road. That is what these, I mean, even your hatchbacks can do it. There's no two ways about it. As long as you have enough ground clearance, you'll be able to go over a lot of bad terrain easily as long as you're careful. So for that, the suspension is fine. If you're talking about the rear suspension with load, like we said, yes, at higher speeds, that will be an issue. And if you aren't careful, you will get that sense of it crashing. So you'll just have to manage that.
All right. Aquitor21 asks, how is the Hyundai's 1.2 liter is so sluggish and not good at giving average when compared to Maruti?
It's a very, very good question. It's something that, and credit for thinking and keeping that in mind, because this, you would automatically assume, and I think it's fair, a lot of people would think, hey, technology is pretty much the same everywhere, right?
Sure.
The best would be the best everywhere, right? It would be really close. But that's not the case. Everybody has slightly different philosophies. They come with different existing infrastructure, let's say, to develop a product.
Right.
So what you end up with is quite different. And in this regard, I think spot on. Hyundai has gone for a more sophisticated feel to the engine. It's a calmer engine, and it isn't the most fuel efficient. That is something that people have said again and again.
Right.
Which is why in this, like I said, the first 4 gears are quite tall because they want it to be fuel efficient. But it also makes it feel quite dull to drive.
Right.
So that's the compromise. How has Maruti managed to, and Suzuki really managed to achieve that is, let's not forget, Suzuki make motorcycles.
Correct.
Right? Their experience and expertise in making small engines is immense.
Of course.
So
yes.
everywhere where they can save weight, how they can improve responsiveness, that's inbuilt logic for them, right? Whereas for most manufacturers, the smaller they go, the tougher it is.
So you're saying if Hyundai were to be making motorcycles, they'd be doing small engines better?
Actually, it's not just small engines. If you know, Yamaha's made engines for a lot of people and not just small cars.
Okay, the next one is from somebody we know personally, a lady called Chitra Zuchi, who wants to know, it's a very good question actually, is it easy to drive? She's considering purchasing one for her retired parents.
Absolutely. I think as I started to think about the Punch over time, this is the car for old people or new people, right?
Right, both ends of the spectrum.
Yeah. So new drivers and older folks. So this is a query that has come across so often because people are saying, I live in another city, my folks are in another city, I want to get them a car and it's safe. It doesn't have to be fast, but it has to be comfortable for them to get in and out of and that kind of stuff. So yeah, from ease of driving, impressive.
And then your parents can send you selfies from the included dash cam.
Oh man. Yeah, there's a dash cam. That's all I can say about it. It works. It was working. You need an app to connect to it and check stuff out.
But why can't Hyundai include an SD card in the dash cam?
It's there.
No. From what I read, the dash cam is not included. You have to bring your own.
Oh, you mean they haven't added one? Oh, okay. That way.
I mean, come on, yeah. Think about the user. Yeah, really, you're going to say, no, macro SD card, you please bring your own.
It's like petrol. हम थोड़ी भर के देंगे.
Petrol, I can understand a petrol is expensive, yeah. Give one memory card, yeah, how hard can it be? Anyway, sorry, I got distracted there again. Harsh Kamble asks, when will India turn from economic perspective to truly appreciating a real car?
I think we're already on that journey.
I think so too, yeah.
I think we're already on, this is an example. The Exter is an example. It's not, like we said, it's not just meant to be a budget car. It's supposed to be something that you will appreciate. It won't be the best car you'll own in your journey of having cars, but it's a great starting point. It's trying to build better experience.
And I think you did mentioned that the starting point itself has become better in quality from where a first car would have been, right?
Look at the basics. You have a car with a very smooth engine. You have a car with great finish on the inside. You have a car that's quiet. Cabin insulation is great. These are small things, but they go a long way in creating a more enjoyable experience, something that will last long.
Got it. Pritam Nandi, who's a regular with MotorInc, hi Pritam, says, how does it compare to the venue as per the overall driving experience?
Right. So I think the venue just has more polish, right? In terms of everything, whether it's the materials on the dash, your options for the engines, it's a little bit bigger, it's a little bit wider. So all of that adds up to create a more substantial experience. And I think the biggest thing is that turbo-petrol, right? If you want that one car which becomes an all-rounder, right? And the venue is very likely not going to be your first car, or even if you're stretching, it'll be a substantial investment, right? When you're going for that, you're going over 10 lakhs. So the venue becomes a more evolved product, right? The first car for a lot of people, this is good. A venue will be a luxury as a first car.
Understood. The next question is from Picaro. How a person with 10 lakh budget can stay sane with all the numerous options in the market?
This is incredible. People are either complaining about not having enough choices or saying there are too many choices.
Okay, so what I do, Picaro, is that when I'm faced with, for example, Swiggy, there's too many options and you're trying to order dinner, it's very easy to eliminate what you don't want rather than to find what you really want. It's a much harder decision-making process. So my solution to you is make a list and just cross out everything that you definitely do not want. You'll discover you're left with a much shorter list, and then the decision-making process just becomes a heck of a lot simpler.
Good point. I think Sherlock did the same thing. Eliminate whatever is impossible.
Yeah, simple. Okay, not simple, but better than where we are at. Soham Maikar asks, with 6 airbags and other safety features, how easy or difficult will it be to get a 5-star safety rating?
I think the electronic stability control, 6 airbags have become preconditions.
So this car has electronic stability control and vehicle stability management.
So there's ESP, ESC. So there are different functions. The software program is one bundle, right? So there are different things that they've been broken down to do, right? So traction control will be one thing. ESP stability program will be to say, hey, keep it planted. ESC will be to say, like, let's say when you're on power, how do you keep it under control, right? Those kind of things.
So if there are more abbreviations, does the price go up? Or is this just like pure marketing and confusing the heck out of the customer for no good reason at all?
See, that's how business works, right? If people are confused, you can charge more.
Is that a good way to do business though? Okay. So we're clear about that.
Yeah, 100%. I think there are way too many variants on offer in most of the cars today. I think brands should also get more focused on what the experience they want to create for a given product.
Correct.
Having 20 variants and engine options is not necessary. I think just do away with a lot of them. Be clear about what this product is meant for.
So you're saying that confusing the customer as a way of making a little bit more money, say ladder strategy or upselling or whatever, versus being clear about what you're offering the customer, how that vehicle will fit into their lives will be a better strategy in the long run?
Wow.
I thought it was obvious. Oh, it's not obvious? Okay, fair enough. Tell me about this crash test rating thing, okay? Like everybody wants to discuss it. Nobody seems to know what they really mean, and nobody understands that these are lab ratings which give you an expectation of what might happen in a crash. But there's a lot more to it than that, including the fact that if you just drove better, you'd probably lower your probability of having a crash in the first place.
Absolutely on point there. The crash test rating angle is this ghost that keeps coming up again and again. And I think there's that comment somewhere where somebody's asked that, why is there no more high strength steel? Why is there not ultra high strength steel? Why is Hyundai focusing on airbags and ESP instead of the core chassis? Listen, I don't know where the high strength steel is, how it's been used, how it's been designed on any vehicle, and neither will you.
No, but wait, Hyundai can just give them a block of high strength steel with the car as an additional purchase, and you put it wherever you like in the car, because that's about as much logic as I can see from the outside perspective. Or dala hota, to it would have been a safer car.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean that's a great point Shumi's making there, because just the materials itself don't make a difference. It's how they're used, where they're used, and that's a lot of know-how. So just talking about it as मैंने 5 किलो ये डाला is not going to change anything if it's not used well. There are innumerous examples, and something that we discuss time and again. Formula One cars are made out of carbon fiber, and if you use just one sheet of carbon fiber to make anything, it's worth nothing. It's absolutely brittle. It will not take the most basic of shocks unless it comes in the right direction. So these are conversations that really frustrate me, because you are living in a state of fear, thinking about crash tests and star ratings. And if you want to live that way, that's your choice. I will keep repeating that every car on sale in India today has to go through a mandatory 55-kilometer crash test. So it's been tested for that. So a base level of safety is being provided to you. You want a higher level of safety? Great. But the worry with this crash test business and the star ratings is that you take that as a guarantee for safety, which means you start pushing boundaries. And let's remember that those are lab tests, like Shumi said. 50% overlap during a frontal collision. Can you guarantee that in the real world? Can you guarantee that the crash will happen only under 60 kilometers an hour? You can't. So I think the top priority should be to invest in yourself, focus on the road, on your car and your driving skills, so that you are actually safer, instead of relying on external factors to keep you safe. So if you want to live in a state of fear, that's your choice. It's not something that we will constantly feed in.
No, please live in a state of fear. I think it's very healthy for the rest of society.
It is. And dude, that's such an... Fear helps sell. If you want to give into that, that's your choice. Yeah.
There's another thing that I wanted to point out here, right? I'm a motorcyclist and I have to deal with my safety largely by myself. My motorcycle is not designed to help me have a great crash or a poor crash. And when they fix it, the motorcycle become unrideable, because they'll take away a lot of my control over the process, which is where this whole thing is headed, right? But I get to choose what kind of jacket, helmet, boots, etc. I use. But you know what's before that? Before that is what skills, how much attention do I pay to those, what speeds do I use, etc., to make sure that I don't crash. Because as a motorcyclist, the ability of the systems to protect me are very, very minimal. You are lucky enough to have vehicles that already do a heck of a lot more than motorcycles. And in India, I think the conversation is skewed because we have just tons more two-wheeler riders than car drivers. So the 6 airbags and the global NCAP rating makes no sense to me, because as a population of people trying to get through the world and dying normally rather than abnormally, motorcyclists are just at more risk, and that should be the larger conversation in the first place. What is this 1-star rating, 2-star rating conversation? First, learn to drive, maybe.
Yeah,
properly, you know that the star rating has no sense if you're not going to wear your seatbelt, right? And it doesn't matter if you are driving and you are wearing the seatbelt. If one of your family members is not wearing one, you're back to square one. So if you're going to ask me about star ratings, can you guarantee that everybody you take along for a drive is always belted up? If you can't, then this discussion is of absolutely no use at all. This is just keyboard racing in another new form. And crash test racing is a heck of a lot more boring than keyboard racing with motorcycles.
Well said.
That's all we've got for the questions. Is there any thoughts that you'd like to...
I think one thing that people are asking time and again is versus Punch, which is the obvious comparison.
So Punch, C3 are the two obvious questions. Fronx is the third.
Fronx? Oh, wow. That's interesting.
Yeah.
I wouldn't go to the Fronx. I think that if you can stretch for the Fronx, great. It's a bigger car. It's like you're stretching into a different price bracket almost. And feature for feature, you're going to end up spending more. It's a great car for sure. If you can stretch for it, by all means, because the experience will be even richer and it'll be a all-rounder, right? Coming back to the Punch and the C3, Punch I will take head on. If you're expecting that this car will write off the Punch, I don't think that will happen.
Has any car ever written off any car in India?
People are expecting that, oh yeah, aaya khatam ho gaya Punch ka story.
Has it ever happened in your history?
It's never happened, but we're quick to write off.
Okay.
Yeah. With the Punch, I think what the Punch has and has done really well, and credit to Tata, is the persona. That sense of toughness, right? The stance, you sit higher up in the Punch. So it feels more confidence inspiring, as we keep saying, that higher seating position. And for people, and often when people are talking about, elders getting in and out, it becomes a bit easier because of that. Okay. It has that higher stance. Whereas in the Exter, it's a slightly lower set. right? So it won't feel as tall as the Punch, especially when you're driving. So there's a little bit of that sense of ruggedness that the Punch has. Is it an advantage out and out? Not really. I think if you're talking about rough roads, I would still think that the Exter will be a better car to deal with all the conditions, because I think the Punch ends up feeling a bit stiff and firm at times, right?
Since the Punch is a Tata and we've had our experience with the Safari and the Harrier,
Right.
is it going to be niggly?
So the Punch I look at as a new generation of cars from Tata. So fit, finish on the inside. I think that's their best product.
Okay.
Right. It only has the one engine, the 3-cylinder 1.2 liter petrol. It's not the sharpest engine around, but it is in its best state that Tata has ever offered. Right. So it's reasonably peppy. It's reasonably smooth. It's a 3-cylinder. So that's where it's at a disadvantage to the Exter, because the Exter's smoother. It won't have the vibrations because that's a 4-cylinder engine.
Right.
So that's how things square off between the Punch and the Exter. Our friends at India Car News, Vikas and Gagan Chaudhary as well, they've done a nice comparison between the two cars. Where they're really getting into the nitty-gritties of things. So if people want to check it out. But of the two, it's clear that the Exter has the more urban and more sophisticated experience to offer.
Okay.
Right? The Punch will be a little bit more welcoming for people who are feeling unsure about driving because of that stance.
Right.
That's about it.
And C3? Or is it irrelevant because it doesn't sell?
I think C3 is sitting a little bit, like we've said in the review as well, it's sitting in between. So it becomes hard to peg it. C3's advantage is that it's so polished in terms of how it works. Right? It's a great all-rounder. I will always maintain that.
Right.
It's just that it ends up feeling budget at times because of whatever design choices they've made. A lot of things have been covered with the new variants that they've got, the top-end variant, bringing in more features.
What's it called? The Shine?
Isn't the Sharp?
Oh, Sharp, is it?
Okay, Sharp, I think. Because it's sharp, man.
How does the French say sharp in your French accent?
Citroen. Have to get into the flow. So the C3, I think the big advantage that the C3 will have compared to these is the engine. Right? It's a superb engine that naturally aspirated 1.2 liter. Great.
Okay. Is there anything else coming into this segment that people should know about before they decide for or against the Exter?
I think for now, this is where we are at. I don't immediately right now.
So no more high-heeled hatchbacks coming?
No, I'm sure there will be more. I'm sure, but right
not immediately.
Not immediately.
So between now and Diwali, you're safe.
Yeah, for sure. I'm sure there will be more coming, but because the Ignis is kind of a rival to the Exter as well, which has been around now for 6 years. So there should be an Ignis replacement coming as well. So that will be somewhere maybe next year. I don't know. I'm just taking a guess here, but it would be about time to see a new Ignis or an Ignis replacement of some sort. So things will come. And like we said, I think this is the future. Smaller cars that feel more premium and just help us get about our lives for the most part.
So Hyundai, we need an Ioniq 2.5. Sorry, my mistake. My expectations are clearly too high. Ioniq 1.5. Okay, we're going to wrap this up. If you have more questions, please leave us a comment. I'd like to leave you with one thought, because that crash test thing is still getting my goat a little bit. When a car wins a 5-star rating, the manufacturer sends out a press release. When a car gets a 0-star rating, Global NCAP makes sure you get a press release. Think about that. Thank you so much for watching.